Hi, everyone. I'm Amelia Phillips, one of the faculty poets here at UNCG's MFA in Writing Program. It's my pleasure to be here tonight to introduce Roy G. Guzmán, whose work I know will invigorate us all. And I know we need it many days into a global pandemic and a few short days before the national election. One thing before I start, Guzmán's book, Catrachos, is available to order through Scuppernong Books, our amazing independent bookstore here in Greensboro, North Carolina. Links are available below our YouTube video. So many of you may know that I am a book reviewer, and one of the best book review editors with whom I've ever worked once told me that he'd noticed an inequitable trend in poetry criticism. That is, poets, especially people of color, LGBTQI plus people, some women, people writing about illness or disability or violence, etc., were often reviewed for their subject matter only, thereby tokenizing them. Of course, subject matter is important to cover, he said, especially when a poet is writing about marginalized experiences in which readers of similar backgrounds might see themselves, and from which readers of different backgrounds might reframe their worldviews. But the editor nudged me. It's also important to talk about the craft of these poets, as one would in the usual review of a poet whose identity might more closely resemble the majority of the literary canon. That is, most definitely white and likely cisgender man with other privileges to boot. And a side note here for all those aspiring book reviewers out there, this doesn't mean one should use the same aesthetic and technical metrics for all poets. The poet Viby Francis once reminded me, there isn't a single poetic tradition, which of course means that there are many ways to think about and enact poetic craft. This is especially important for all of us to remember as we engage poetry in the context of the site in which our MFA program operates, the Academy, which has traditionally upheld certain poets, forms, and techniques as, quote, better than those formed outside of its auspices. Okay, stepping off my soapbox for now. I tell you all of that because I want to emphasize just how important it is, especially for our students, that we not just look to Roy G. Guzmán's first book, Catrachos, for its subject matter, for the ways it captures the subjectivity of a multilingual queer Honduran living in the United States at this particular moment in history. This is a really important subjectivity for all of us to encounter, especially as Guzmán interrogates the machinations of xenophobic state policies without forgetting the angst in their body. But I want us to recognize also the ways in which Guzmán's subjectivity has shaped their poetic craft, the ways that they move within and sometimes against linguistic sense in their poem. Some of you know that I'm hoping to soon teach a queer poetry and poetics class here at UNCG. In that class, I want to puzzle over what it might mean to, quote, queer poetic language. And then I want to complicate it further. Sorry, dog noises in the background. I want to complicate it further. How does that change person to person, between gender identities, across regional accents, and across languages? No doubt I will teach Guzmán's poems as we ask these questions, in part because Catrachos bewildered me in the best ways possible, making the English language stranger, more tensile. Dr. Kim Tallbear, a scholar of Indigenous racial science and sexualities, describes queer as anything that's against the state. I think that definition could apply to Guzmán's work. Just take a look at the long poem, Self-Portrait According to George W. Bush. But if we expand the word state to include all large oppressive systems, including language rules and poetic conventions, it also works. Catrachos drives a wedge into the line as we know it by often employing inline vervules, those little slashes in the middle of the line, as a kind of break without a break, as if they are cracks that could turn into breaks if enough force was put on the line. Elsewhere, the choice of diction is so unexpected, so volatile, that I felt charged up reading it. I felt even dizzy. It's like Guzman runs so much electricity through each word and phrase, like macho manic evacuation and measled fantasia sewage, that they nearly blow their fuses. Just listen to these lines from Jurisdiction on page 58 if you have your copy of the book. Child of butchery, I now rove in nowhere, skin aqueducts, old found lands. I hide my ambitions in skunk-stamped burrows, pluck sarcophagi out of city diapers. I let the rain stone me, knowing full well my futile desire to belong. The language here and elsewhere in the book is just astonishing. To be astonished is to be stunned and bewildered. The word has its roots in Latin, extonare, meaning to thunder out. And this language thunders. We hear Spanish intermixed with English because, as Guzman writes, Spanglish is caged thunder, oblivious certitude of orchids. In the passage I just read above, we have all those competing interwoven sounds, the ch of child and butchery that morphs into the k of aqueduct, skunk, sarcophagi, alongside the o vowel sounds in rove and nowhere and old and burrows. We have a word that's unsettled on what part of speech it might be. Does the speaker rove in skin aqueducts, or does the speaker skin aqueducts? Across the collection, we have passage after passage of great music, from bombastic consonants to the lullabying cowbelling of vowels. The images are sometimes surreal, as in the passage above, but not in a cheap ornamental way. They seem to enact, no, embody a bewilderment of the soul, one of celebration and grief, of rage and acceptance. This is a book of both ands rather than either ors. From the spelling bee episode of PBS's Arthur to a poetic dolmen for those 49 people killed in the 2016 Pulse nightclub shooting, Guzman's poems aren't narrowed by their multilingual queer Honduran subjectivity, rather they are expanded by them, containing not Whitman's multitudes exactly, but, quote, a post-Pangea of intimacies. These are poems that cannot be summarized. Doing so would squeeze out their brilliance. Rather, these poems are experiences manifested through a kind of, quote, hocus pocus wonder, an alchemy of the poet's craft and subjectivity. Guzman is a Honduran poet whose first collection, Catrachos, was published by Grey Wolf Press on May 5th, 2020. Raised in Miami, Florida, Roy is the recipient of a 2019 grant from the National Endowment for the Arts. In 2017, they were named a Ruth Lilly and Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Poetry Fellow. They are also the recipient of a 2017 Minnesota State Arts Board Initiative grant and a 2016 Jessel Award for Excellence in Poetry. Their work has been included in Best New Poets 2017 and Best of the Nat 2017. After the Pulse nightclub massacre in Orlando, Roy's poem, Restored Mural for Orlando, was turned into a chapbook with the help of poet and visual artist Dee Allen to raise funds for the victims. I hope you will join me in welcoming Roy G. Guzman to read from their poems.
Oh my goodness, Amelia. I feel like crying now after that beautiful introduction that I already want published and framed and, scented, all kinds of things. Thank you so much for that beautiful, astute reading and for putting me in conversation with these brilliant minds and just like in conversation with these brilliant concepts. Thank you. Um, you may hear my dogs outside of the door here playing their canine version of Jane Eyre. So hopefully we won't get too distracted tonight. I want to thank the University of North Carolina Greensboro's MFA program in creative writing for for inviting me tonight. I definitely want to thank Amelia, Terry, Jesse, Michael, and everybody else who is making this possible. Thank you so much for joining us. As Amelia pointed out, this book came out in the midst of this pandemic in May of 2020. And I'm very grateful to Patricia Smith, Hyde Erdrich, and Eduardo Corral for their beautiful blurbs, and everybody else who has contributed something to the ways that y'all are reading the book. So I'm going to start with one poem here, and it's titled "The American Dream." Um, and it just a little bit of context, although it's not necessary. I was an undocumented child, and I used to go help my mom clean houses. So I wasn't going to school. Instead, I was doing this. The American Dream. I rest my head on my mother's lap at the bus stop in Alapata. 2 rides until we reach the first house, past the most untroubled labyrinth of palm trees for the second, the third in the afternoon. Roosters have yet to birthmark their morning in another country. An alligator gasps. As we disembark in Miami Springs, our crises yawn like lonely suns. Half an hour and the white children will awake. Mommy whispers her day's planned chores to me. Boleros stir the kitchen sanctity. Our patrones carry their lunch packs to their car, fasten all the seat belts. For a moment, we turn this into our transitional home. Spray the untrained chemicals on every surface, every counter, their mirror, our mirror. I play with droplets on my arms, a mixture of bleach, no gloves. Haven't we already gambled our future kingdom and lost? On the stove, the kettle squeals like school children during recess. That is an image I'm willing to defend. My mother's hands become two mummified prayers that can't recall their ancestral song, obsessed with leaving no dust on the vintage couch, the oblong table, Barbie's large house. If I take a hand before it can grace mine, it blanks out on what it meant to verse me in, to absorb consuming the anxiety of surfaces fixed on appearing young and debutante. I breathe the pine soul oil's direct ancestors. Someday, I say to myself, I'll resent the nature of wood for its suffocating fresh air, for its prolonged cruelty. We work for families who don't own dishwashers, but even if they did, my mother's pride won't let her sacrifice her cleaning merits by studying the electronic usurpation of what her hands can very well do. It takes us long to finish each house. A smile graces her face after we upturn the others. For now, we're a team. I rarely meet anyone older than 5. In muscular isolation, I develop my own fabrications with the plot lines of a precocious loner who picks up books in English to learn what to call each appliance, the angles of an expensive bathroom, what snakes inside master bedrooms. In my undrafted bill of child workers' rights, I am instructed to devote my livelihood, mastering with words what I can't comprehend with my silly rough hands. By the end of each workday, other mothers cough the same tragedy. Single women sleeping in tiny bedrooms where their landlords overcharge for dinner. At the bus stop, pants camouflage varicose veins. Women flaunt a proud catalog of grandchildren. If they trust you, they'll share what they get paid. Some patrones are less cruel, but for every fridge with full access, another has very specific precautions on the door. I am the only child who goes to work with his mother. The others have not saved enough money to pay a coyote. Sometimes we share Burger King, sometimes McDonald's. Under a managerial sun, we revolutionize the concrete benches with our tired asses. Exhume stories of lands we are too afraid won't recognize us if we ever go back. Because if we do, it'll be against our will. Because our grandmothers require insulin. Because those grandchildren need school supplies and education. If we rise tomorrow, my mother will tickle my feet to hop in the shower. A bowl of warm milk will greet me at the table. On our way to the bus, we will worship our bodies in hush. So that is one way to enter this book, Catrachos, which, if you don't know the title for Catrachos, there's a note that I want to read out loud for those of you who want to sort of get a sense of what work the title is trying to do. So a note on the title is that in the mid 1800s, William Walker, an American filibuster, attempted to take over Central America and reimagine the region as slave states under United States rule. At first, he tried to build a colony in Mexico. After successfully taking advantage of civil unrest in Nicaragua, Walker became president of the country in 1856. With United States President Franklin Pierce's endorsement, he ruled for a year. During his reign, Walker went to war with Costa Rica and plagued the country with cholera. He was eventually defeated by Honduran General Florencio Catruches' troops, which included Salvadorian soldiers. Walker was charged and executed in 1860. Because Catruches' name was difficult to pronounce, as Nicaraguans welcomed the general and the soldiers, they yelled, "Aquí vienen los Catruches." From Catruches' name, Salvadorians became known as Salvatruchos and Hondurans Catrachos. Another poem I'd like to read is one that Emilia was they alluded to in their introduction. It's titled Arthur's Spelling Trouble, and of course, it's inspired by one of the episodes from the animated TV series. Arthur's Spelling Trouble, and it's Trubble. Jenna is asked to spell essential. She trips before Arthur is challenged with aardvark. He freaks out. What am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? Arthur rolls his arms, swings in his blue jeans and yellow cotton sweater, sings out each mellifluous letter as if memory held the body accountable for demonstrating the ritual of remembrance. Gets it right. With only a year of ESL, I win my school spelling bee. I spell platypus correctly, though I can't conceive of a platypus. I know plate, I know pus. My mother works three jobs to pay for my tuition because the people we clean houses for claim it's better than getting beat up in public school. I come home with a bloody nose nearly every day. The school's denomination is Lutheran, so we memorize Luther's small catechism, forever confessing sins in hushed purgatory. It's private like the school I attended in Tegucigalpa. You can't get a decent education otherwise. And my mom reminds me where to mark accents on Spanish words, like crossing off memories I'm losing from lack of access. Just imagine a clock, she says, and the altar behind me vibrates when I am assigned the word platypus, picturing it in my head as if I were cutting around it with a crude pair of scissors. I'm not expected to win. To everyone's knowledge, I don't speak sufficient English. Arthur advances to the finals, but he doesn't want to represent his class at the school wide spellathon. Mr. Ratburn thinks I can do it. He shares with his family over a simple dinner. If only all brown children had similar mentors. I begin gorging on new words, hood nomenclatures. I learn their roots, but never my own. I spelled platypus, and even the pastor's wife can't trust her ears. Afterward, the certificate bears my name in sloppy ink over marker. Maybe she was starting to write down someone else's last name when I was declared champion, or maybe she wanted her son, who's in my grade, to make a comeback and win the title. He's blonde, and I have a crush on him because I can see all the veins through his pale body. He excels in every subject. That's what everyone expects of him. I receive the same grades, but that's not expected of me. Literature is the subject that persistently keeps me off the honor roll. So I keep looking up words from Romeo and Juliet in the dictionary, but my dictionary isn't smart enough. Inadvertently, I'm looking up contractions, abridgments, contraction, 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 as in establishing a contract with anything that dwindles, as in new disease, as in unplanned childbirth of words. Platypus from flat footed, the schoolmate who called me fag behind my back enrolled in the Marines around the time I signed up. We train as a unit. I look over my shoulder, paranoid that given the opportunity, he would out me. He was flat footed, was never deployed. Faggot. 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 The majority of us recruits were the first to land in Iraq and Afghanistan, primarily poor, sons of refugees, to die abroad as if dying on US soil wasn't already effortless. They're not looking for brown minds, but brown war machines, my stepfather says. The beauty of machines is that they can be disassembled and reassembled. DW says, I'm not a prisoner of my vocabulary, but I can spell anything that prays for my destruction. A palindrome is a word that has two chances to disappoint you. There came a point when I was so pedantic and territorial with words I couldn't even finish full sentences. Spelled words in my sleep, embalmed my thoughts. I watch Arthur when I'm sick to my past lover's chagrin. Cartoons are too infantile, they say, like parents who dab hot sauce on their children's fingers to discourage them from thumb sucking. They can't see, though, which episodes I've hidden my luggage in, kept my dog eared thesaurus, my musty diplomas like diplomats to intercede for me when my accent is called out as if my tongue held lesions unconscious to me. What dictionary are you using? The brain says after he misspells fear. Fear as a part of speech. Synonyms. Transgressions that can only be found in mirrors. Can you use it in a sentence? I was applying eyeshadow when my cousin stumbled into the bedroom my mother and I slept in. I must have left an after image in the mirror, smeared with a brown boy's thick eyelashes, a shade of blue to enrapture other brown boys. As I turn around to stare into her eyes, ankles shaking in my mother's pumps, hands behind me as if handcuffed. I slipped the cosmetic through the narrow gap of a drawer, half the heels trapped under the chiffonier, a broken TV screen. In the episode, Arthur, in his round brown glasses, polytonal specter, sings letters to a word that might define him. My parents aren't home yet. I rub vapor rub on my temples. I'm back at the Lord's table, mispronouncing the wild dream that finds me in a language that I might speak, from which I might drink. Just looking at my time here. Okay, so I've got about 13 minutes left. Um, I'm gonna read this poem. It's titled Quinceañera. And this poem is a persona poem. It's written from the perspective of a child who has been beheaded. Quinceañera means 15-year-old in Spanish. And there are more details around this poem that I can talk about, but this is for para todas, for all of them. Quinceañera. After they dropped their machetes on a crescent orchard, my head rolled like a deflated bowl de football, and I mouthed the piss soaked muck, the blood that stung my prude reputation, leaving a riverbank of useless clues under my fingernails, leaf limbs, distressed dirt. My age matched another shallow grave, not the musky vestiary they threw me in, which they kept pressing over and over with their shovels as a sign that had they suspected, they would have hanged my assailants by the balls. I know balls now. The rakers labor for hours. Girls gossip in their navy uniform skirts on their way home from La Prepa. Boys eulogize their fathers tilling my corpse. A neighborhood crush found my fly buzzing crown, a chunk of torso, expendable limbs. Toddlers pretended to dig the ground like little chihuahuas swimming in sullied water. When you go missing inside these untransferable shrubs, they make you skip the morgue. Abuela's albatross. Your mother forgets how to howl in her own body. Your father calls for dinner with the tone of a hot stove. Later, I took a gander at the wall of tears where they place skeleton flowers, where they pose our naive portraitures. I had come back extracted, half ripped and naked, my lips kissing my own belly in front inside a black garbage bag. A trick a teenager can only dream of performing in front of her future absentees. What talents are we brown girls missing out on before we can headline Broadway musicals penned by lyricists familiarized with the weeded notes of bitches? Appear in the front pages of American Daily News and grace a constellation of highway ads in the arms of a heavily trafficked boulevard. Muster men to stare at us from their automobiles as they drive home to their sizable suburban homes where they'll kiss their daughters goodnight, laboring over their curly, shampooed hairs, the letters of their names framed in golden ostentation over their beds, their father's whispers retreating their lips, knowing when to drift home, while I'm stuck demonstrating how frontiers eat the body like small gazelles in an empty shopping mall. Even I, a remorse, can't afford to walk into. So I'm going to give you a little bit of taste of switching gears a little bit. There's a series of poems within the book titled Queerdactyl, and I'm going to try to read about two of these poems, maybe three. We'll see if time allows. All you have to know in terms of the context for the Queerdactyl poems is that there are several Queerdactyls that are trying to basically, they're dancing, they're just like being themselves as this asteroid that sometimes goes by the name Dude Steroid is trying to crash into their party. And then there's a Mama Deerodactyl who is inspired by Mommy Dearest, but she's also inspired by like the mother of like a house, like the House of Lords, right? If any of you have seen Pose, many queer and trans homes were led by a mother. So this is to all of these figures. Queerdactyl. We vote in graveyards, headstones big as daddy's factory plant, Playboy magazines littered under the bathroom sink, sour cream drip drops on our mustaches. No one knew whose mom had charred the tortillas. We scraped marmoleum floors with our heels. Geometry went defunct, went apparel, berserk, bull in jeans, torero. Our mothers near their lips to our dirty claws as we sway them in men's holy unshaven catastrophes. Prayers so lit you think they went out to find a job. We no longer search for food on the ground or in the sky. New border by its shame, plunge our bodies into it. The way a father's hand might twist, tighten, rip a rosary. Have we ever told you what else we felt when the earth's doors betrayed authority? When wind unfurled wig, crystal beats, the sacrament in our hands? Had mercy shown up as mercy, we might have stopped the idealized throttle, picked our hips from the humid ground, fashioned ourselves a new savior. Let's see. So that's one of them. This next one is the second one in this series, and I think I need to like reposition myself because it's a little bit it's a very sort of kinetic kind of poem. So Queerdactyl. You don't have to watch me whip my wings back and forth to count the number of fires I've put out. Single-handedly, lady don't play. Up and out, don't break your nails on that tricera thought. Out and up, work that bill, work that bill, work that bill. Dude steroid wanted to barge in here, old dude steroid explaining, old PC blazing, but I was like, nope. You can't be going around preaching that embers wash off more easily than glitter. Not if you're going to fry our camouflage nightgowns with your silicate dick complex, exploding on every beach we go sunbathing on, like a bottle of Viagra roulette. They used to call me Shorty for my short appendages, but I ain't chicken head, no duck head. Don't confuse my bobbing, my elongated lips for submission, for a trick daddy's mass extinction. Lift that tail, swing that pitchfork, swing that tail, tail drop. Mama Pterodactyl used to say that when you deal with murderous jaws larger than yours, you ought to multiply your fortunes near an active volcano. Sniff the fumes, swallow your enemy's offspring in one gulp, and go for the long necks first. Bigotry will claim innocence even while it burns our sanctuaries. Rapture hole, Tirana hole, you ain't fly like me hole. To hell with dude steroids doing Triassic for pay. The voyeur will always miss the freedom of a red sunset. Box dip, hairpin, mating squawk, schwam, cunty, 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 cunty. Don't let them know where you hide the rest of your fangs, sis, or that you're into fossil-friendly excavation sites that can fit an entire rainbow. So what if I have pycnofibers on my back? Call me cub, call me bear. I ain't roaring like a dino Katy Perry. Bring it. I said, bring it. Now, sachet. Duroid still hovering in the sky. Closet queen, angel dust. In this ball of fire, hate can't enter our ozone. And for as long as the earth remains a hungry bay, there will be no death drive. We won't perish. Our scaly spirits can survive in fields of magma. Don't they know? Silly hoes. Hoes that can't even get into this party. Hoes. No one's ditching this bitch without leaving an impression. Phoenixes on the dance floor, thrusting in the face of loss. I don't know if I have more time for another poem. Yes, so I'll read one of the other Queerodactyl poems. Thank you all so much again for joining me and joining all of us tonight. Queerodactyl. After they locate and excavate your wing fossils, perseverance might be the trait you're known for. How swiftly you sloped downward to pick up the carcasses floating just above the blood-stained surface of your old neighborhood. In the laboratory, the paleontologist will use radiometric dating to zoom into what bequeathed you that agency to fly. This one might have outlasted all the others, they'll say, might have even seen each one disappear behind a bolt of fire blasted from who knows where. Or you might have been the first to vanish directly in the way of the asteroid's course. Who will, in the end, exhume our myths conclusively? A young angel's bones, shaped just like yours, were uncovered this morning. A group of diggers hadn't found anything exciting for months, in jeopardy of losing all their funding. I too have buried myself under the heavy presence of change from a longing perhaps to find my remnants or their profiles in places where curious strangers might prize them. Church is anything with a pair of wandering hands and a bucket. I too have questioned the usefulness of finding a body stuck in that perpetual position of near flight, arms extended like the incandescence from a lamppost at night, and wished it be mine. Thank you so much, everybody.